Hi everyone, I hope you can all hear me. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Steph and I am one of the music sales managers here at Spotify in the commercial partnerships team. I work across all of the native ads available to all labels. And one of the best parts of my job is seeing the creative and strategic ways that you all use Marquee. So I'm really thrilled to be hosting today's session. And we'll use this time to share both best practices for ensuring your Marquee campaigns are best set up to enable your new release goals. So we've got lots of exciting content that we hope you will incorporate into your new release toolkit. So I've already introduced myself, but I just wanted to also give a really warm welcome to my co-host today, Josephine. So I'll just hand over to Josephine to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Josephine. I lead product marketing for Marquee, work really closely with product teams in building new features for y'all for the product, and then work really closely with Steph and her team in bringing those new features and products to artists in their team. So thanks so much for joining today. We're super excited. Before I hand it back over to Steph, we'd love to know who all is in the room. So in the chat in the bottom of your screen, you might see a poll pop up. So we'd love to know, are you an artist manager, part of a label team, maybe in an agency or some other role, just so we have a better sense of who's here today. Awesome. Thanks for getting your votes in. Great. Well, so nice to have y'all. Thank you so much for joining. We hope this session is super valuable to you and regardless of the role you are on the team. So I'll hand it back over to Steph to get us started.
Thanks, Josephine. Okay, so as I mentioned previously, the purpose of today's session is to dive into strategies for using Marquee to enable your most important new release goals. So in terms of the agenda, I'll start off with a quick refresher on Marquee, which is our marketing tool for promoting new releases. And then I'm going to kick it back over to Josephine, who will actually take us through a live demo of the Spotify for Artists dashboard. So with a few examples of how you can think about using Marquee to reach 3 key music marketing goals. So that's audience engagement, audience reactivation, and audience growth. And then, of course, we'll save a few minutes for Q&A at the end of the session for any questions that come up, but no need to save those for the end. Feel free to drop those questions into the chat throughout this presentation, and we'll do our best to address them either live or someone will be able to write back to you and get back to you with a response. Cool. So let's get into why we're all here today. You've probably received one of these for an artist you listen to on Spotify. So what you're seeing on the screen here is Marquee. It's a full screen sponsored recommendation of your new release. So when a listener clicks on your Marquee, they dive right into your new release. So we built Marquee in response to artists and label team feedback that they actually wanted a more effective way, a more music-centric way to promote new releases. So, for example, we heard the other social ads often reach listeners outside of a music context when they aren't ready to listen to new music. We also heard the proxy metrics like demographics, they aren't always the best gauge of potential fandom. And finally, we heard that attribution, connecting the dots between ad spend and actual streaming, could be quite challenging. So across all of these challenges, there's a common thread. So many of today's marketing tools aren't effective because they weren't made for marketing music. However, Marquee was and is built exclusively for marketing new releases. So whereas these other tools reach listeners out of context, next to other random ads for pots, pans, dishwashers, whatever, Marquee actually reaches listeners when they're open, when the app's open and they're actually ready to stream. So While listener targeting with other tools is often based off things like interest targeting and broad demographics, Marquee actually targets the right premium and free listeners based on their actual streaming history, which is more effective for turning listeners into even bigger fans. So finally, Marquee actually measures and reports on listener behavior after seeing the campaign. So we actually report on things like saves and playlist ads, which are really important factors. This works out the intent rate that people are going to go on and listen to your new release. So you can see how your listeners are actually engaging with the new music that you're actually promoting, which we know this can be a challenge with other tools. So this music native targeting, timing, and measurements actually make Marquee far more cost effective than other social ads. And we actually recently worked with 8 labels and distributors to study the effectiveness of our campaign tools versus other digital advertising options across 10 new releases. I'm really happy to say that the results proved that Marquee is 10 times more cost effective than social ads. So delivering 10 times more listeners for every dollar spent on similar social ads. Marquee also delivered 100% higher click to listen rate on average. So hopefully that was a good refresher on Marquee and its value with promoting new releases. I'm now going to hand it back over to Josephine to run through the live demo in the Spotify for Artists dashboards. As a disclaimer, these examples are for illustrative purposes only. Over to you, Josephine.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Steph. Do y'all see my screen? Everyone see it? Cool.
Yes,
awesome. Great. Well, super excited to walk y'all through the live demo. Just one quick second to make sure this is here. Great. So let's start off by taking a look at the segments page in Spotify for Artists. So this is the page that if you go into Spotify for Artists and go to the audience section of Spotify for Artists, you're going to see this new segments page. It was really built to help you better understand the makeup of your audience. It's available to all artists on Spotify for Artists, and it's only on desktop, so it's actually not on web. But if you start by looking at your active audience, so these are the listeners who have intentionally streamed your music in the last 28 days. What we mean by when we say actively streamed your music or intentionally streamed your music is that we're really talking about people who are focused on streaming you either on your artist profile, your album release pages, or their own library and playlist. And we think they're really, really quite important to fan development. So if you take a deeper look, though, there's even a breakdown within the active audience. So you have super listeners, moderate listeners, and light listeners. Super listeners are the most dedicated portion of your active audience. They're the people that have streamed you the most over the last 28 days. Whereas moderate listeners have streamed you less than super listeners, more than light listeners. They still have that potential to develop into super listeners. And then finally, light listeners are the ones who have streamed you actually the less out of the active audience, but they have streamed you actively in the last 28 days. So the goal of all these is to really move people from light to moderate and to super. Marquee really helps you better meet these 3 goals, whether it's helping you drive engagement, helping you reactivate your listeners, or even helping grow your audience. So we're going to focus first, go through a few different live examples of how these kind of tie across the audience page, campaigns where you build Marquee, and kind of speak to how the whole thing fits together. So starting with engagement. So we're back in the segments page in Spotify for Artists. And maybe you notice here that the size of your active audience has changed over time. So it's actually gone down 6 percentage points. And specifically your super listeners are kind of going down. So your goal then becomes, how can I turn these light and moderate listeners into super listeners? So you go over to the campaign section of Spotify for Artists. where you see Marquee, and then you actually have an upcoming single called Guava that you're ready to promote. And your goal for this release really becomes, how can I get more super listeners? So you go to create campaign, you select what team you're promoting on behalf of. You select your target country. Perhaps you're really focused on the US. You're focused on starting your campaign the day that it releases. And then when you scroll down here, that's when you're deciding, who do I want to target? How am I going to get those super listeners to go back up again? And that's when you're really focused on moderate and light listeners. So your campaign runs, and after it runs, you go back into campaigns to check in on your results. So you can see that a bunch of different statistics on how the campaign's done. Again, you targeted your light and moderate listeners. But if you go to this section called audience development, that's a new thing that we're actually rolling out in the coming days. You're going to start to see it soon. So it's just a sneak peek. But you can really see here, the purpose of this section was to better help you understand, how are you developing your audience, and specifically if your goal was around driving engagement and getting these super listeners, this new metric, amplified listeners, really can help you better understand that. So amplified listeners are the people from your active audience that streamed your promoted release for the first time after seeing your marquee. So before seeing your marquee, they still hadn't engaged actively with your new release, and this was the marquee really brought them over the edge. So you actually got 2,000 amplified listeners from this specific campaign. There's a bunch of other details in the results page, so you can kind of continue better understanding, how did I convert listeners, how quickly did they convert, and what were the active streams per listener. Your next goal might be reactivation. So maybe it's been a while since you released new music, or you've had folks kind of drop off, and now you're really focused on reactivating them and bringing them back in. So we're going to walk through a second example that's really focused on this. So again, starting in the segments page of S for A, so you have 40% of your total audience, of the people that have streamed in the last couple of years, are now considered previously active. That means that they used to be in your active audience. They used to actively engage with your music, but for some reason, they haven't actively streamed your music in the last 28 days. They could still be streaming you from program sources, but you really see this as the opportunity to reactivate these listeners. And this actually shows you, if you can see on the top right, this shows you the worldwide number, but you can look for what portion of my audience is previously active in Canada, what portion of it is previously active in the UK, the United States, and then maybe you determine from all these places that the UK, Canada, and the US are really the places you want to focus on reactivating these listeners. So same thing, you kind of take this data, use it to inform your strategy for your campaign, and your strategy is really focused on reactivation in this case. You've got an eligible release coming up, a single called Childhood. You go to create that campaign. You select the team, the country, maybe you start with Canada, your start date, and then when you get to this audience targeting section, that's when you're going to focus on previously active audience. You saw on the segments page that's where you really wanted to focus, and targeting these folks will really drive that reactivation. Let's assume that you also targeted your previously active audience in the UK and the US. Same kind of thing here, where you can go back to the campaigns, see how your campaigns are trending across those markets, the United States, the UK, and Canada. And you go back and check your campaign results. So what you see here is, again, in this new audience development section, we really focus on how many listeners did you reactivate. So this shows you here that 500 listeners rejoined your active audience after intentionally streaming your promoted release. And that's because you were targeting previously active audience and you brought them back in to the active audience. This is for the US, but then you can see similar results across the UK and across Canada. If you look at the upper left, upper right, that shows you kind of how you're doing across all three. So far, you reactivated more than 1,500 listeners in the UK, US, and Canada across all these different markets and helping you achieve your goal of reactivation. And then finally, maybe one of your other release goals is around growth and growing your audience. So we're back in the segments page in Spotify for Artists, and you go to your active audience. This 7% of your audience is active. You'll see here that the active audience has been declining over time, and you're looking for ways to increase that. It's good timing too, because you're releasing a collab single with 2 other main artists. So this is really prime time for growing your active audience. So you go back to campaigns where Marquee lives. You have an eligible release called Thief coming up soon. You go to create your campaign. You select your country, maybe you're targeting the US, you select your start date. And here, maybe you're focused on even setting up multiple campaigns. Maybe you want to do the first campaign on release day and then stagger the second campaign for a little bit post. So this is really focused on that first campaign to drive growth. You go to the targeting section, and this is really key, is that when you have a marquee, by default, your campaign will reach all listeners from your reachable audience, but also the reachable audience of any other main artist on your release. So you choose to target your reachable audience, knowing that you're going to be expanding your reach beyond just your reachable audience. And then you have a second campaign that you want to run, and you do that 10 days after your release day and after that first campaign. So here you see create another campaign. You have that one launching, it's in the US, and you go to check your campaign results. The campaign's run, it finished in August. And then what you see here is that you actually drove new active listeners. So new active listeners are listeners that joined your active audience for the first time by actively streaming your release. And of those 640 folks that you're adding to your active audience, like we saw on the segments page, 300 hadn't streamed your music at all in the last 2 years on Spotify. So you kind of think of that second group like people that are newer, that could be newer to your listeners. They haven't streamed in the last 2 years. And this is, again, because you were reaching your reachable audience and you had a release with multiple main artists, you were able to target their audience as well. And then, like I said, you had 2 campaigns running. So for the second campaign, you go in to check your results, and same thing. You're seeing this growth in new active listeners, helping you grow your active audience. 460 listeners joined your active audience for the first time. And of those 460, 100 hadn't streamed your music anywhere on Spotify in the last 2 years. So far, you've reached 1,000 new active listeners with your campaign. So these were just a few examples of how we see Marquee working in Spotify for Artists alongside your analytics, alongside segments, and alongside measurement to really help you achieve your new release goals. So that's the end of the demo portion. I hope that was super helpful. And with that, we're going to turn it over to some of the pre-submitted Q&A questions that y'all asked us. We'll answer those, and then if you haven't already, please enter any questions you have into the chat, and we'll just start going through them. So starting with the first one. So first question is, how can I think about using Marquee with other tools on Spotify to achieve my new release goals? So we really love this question because we do see Spotify for Artists as a big toolkit to help you achieve your goals, whether it's Marquee or whether it's various different tools. So we just wanted to put together an example of a sample strategy of how you could approach meeting your new release goals with all of our tools. So let's say you're really focused on driving engagement from your audience. So there's a few different things you could be doing. So we divided it into pre-release, release cycle, and off cycle. But again, this is just a sample potential actions you could take. It really depends on what you're focused on. But pre-release, before release day, you could update Spotify for Artists with your merch. And you can tag merch to your upcoming release. And we've seen just an insight here is that over 50% of merch clicks come in the first 24 days post-release. So we think getting it ready pre-release is a good idea because it'll really help you set you up for the next 24 days. And then let's assume you're dropping a single, kicking off your release cycle pre your album release. So let's assume that you promote a single with a marquee to your light and moderate listeners, kind of how we showed in that example and in the demo. What you do when you have a marquee, and like Stephanie showed, is that you're actually driving traffic to your release page. And if merch is tagged to the single, then it'll be on that place as well. So the active audience, and we see this as well with the active audience, is that the active audience represents 80% of your monthly merch purchases. So it's an important audience if merch is something you care about. And then we have a few other features which are still being rolled out and still in alpha, but we think they fit into all the ways you could drive engagement. The first is countdown pages. That's essentially a way to help you drive pre-saves before your album. So, and what we've seen is that 80% of pre-savers from a countdown page stream the release within the first week. So it's really important way to engage your audience as well. And then you could also use clips, which is also a newer feature, which are these under 30-second videos to help tease your upcoming album. They'll help you drive saves, follows, streams. It's really all about engaging audiences and helping hype up that album release moment. Let's assume then your album drops, but you actually decide to delay your marquee campaign, and you actually do it right at the end of the timing with which you can start a marquee. So let's say 20 days post-release, you start a marquee targeting your active audience. One of Marquee's really cool features is that it excludes people that have actively streamed your release. So when you have a marquee on day 20, you're not reaching anyone who's already actively streamed your release. So that could be another strategy too. And then we've seen that over 50% of releases peak more than 7 days post-release. So this is just another way to kind of keep riding that wave of your release and driving momentum. So that was one question we got, which hopefully that helps us kind of sample strategy as well. And then the second question we got is, what are good benchmarks for the number of listeners in my active audience and previously active audience in the segments tab? So this is another common question that we get, and there really isn't a one size all answer here. The number of listeners in your active audience and previous active audience will really vary depending on a number of factors, including where you are in your release cycle and where you are in your overall career. So rather than focusing on broader benchmarks, we recommend you really keep an eye on the breakdown of your specific audience and how that's changing as you move throughout the release cycle and over time. Cool. So those were a few of the questions, and I think now we're gonna open it up to broader Q&A. So I think we should have some questions popping up if y'all haven't already started putting them in there.
We do indeed. We have lots and lots of questions. So I'll start to read through it. Hopefully we'll get through as many as we can in today's session. So the first one reads, one of the topics I'd love to hear about is finding out if running marquee ads has positive return on investment over time. What are the metrics we can look at to determine if running marquee ads has a positive return for an artist? Josephine, I'm going to hand that one to you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so we really think about return on investment for marquee, not just restricted to the new release moment and the few days post-release, but really around the full lifetime value of a listener. So a few of the ways we use to really get a sense of that is saves and playlist ads. We know that these metrics are indicative of how people plan to stream your release in the future. We should link the fan study, but we have a bunch of statistics on the value of those actions to driving continued engagement with your music. So Marquee lifts those actions. We've seen that people who see a Marquee are 2 times more likely to save or add to a playlist than people who don't. So those are definitely metrics to keep an eye on as your campaigns kind of going through and really caring about. But then I think it also to the demo really depends on what your goals are. If your goals reactivation and reactivating your audience, then looking at reactivated listeners, which is just like I said, sneak peek. It's hot off the press. It's coming live. That's a really important metric for that goal. Versus if your goal is to really engage your active audience, amplified listeners is a good way to do that. And in general, what we're trying to do with the segments page is to help show how your audience is developing over time and how tools like Marquee can help drive that development.
Thanks, Josephine. Moving on to the second question from Gregory, an indie artist with iconic results with Marquee, which is always great to hear, but wonders, does running Marquee get in the way of the organic streams that our editorial team is looking for? And on the contrary, can successful Marquee results help with getting songs on editorial? So firstly, and I think this may have been answered, we only serve a Marquee to users who have not yet engaged with the release. So if the release is promoted elsewhere, let's say through a playlist, anyone who has listened to that release, then we will not serve the Marquee to them. And then to answer the question around Marquee results, helping getting songs into editorial, Marquee is a format that you purchase and does not have effect on how it is within any of our editorial teams. Okay, so next question. To add to my last question, as an indie, if we can't afford to reach our full audience, how can we afford to do audience development? So you will see a forecast available for your release. You do not have to book the full available spend. So we have a minimum spend of $100 on Spotify for our artist self-serve or $250 on managed service. So as long as you're meeting the minimum spend requirement, then you can spend as little as that or as much as you can afford within that budget available. Next question is, how do you join the fan engagement beta? Josephine, I'm going to hand that one to you.
I actually don't know the answer to this one. I'm not sure if we're talking about the countdown pages, alpha, or something else, but we can get back to you on more details and maybe get more clarity on which product you're exactly talking about, because I just want to make sure too. But thanks for the question.
Good plan. Okay, next one. Do you recommend running the 3 types of campaigns simultaneously? So the way I would read that is the different segments. So utilizing maybe light, moderate, and super fans. Yes, you can. You can run all of our segments together, or you can pick just one. I think it really depends on the goal of the release and what you're trying to do. If you're trying to move light listeners up to moderate up to super, obviously you can run a campaign, you can check the results, and then you can book another campaign to move fans along the funnel. So I guess to sum up, it really does depend on the goal, but you can run multiple campaigns targeting either the separate segments, or you can do them all together and we report back on each line individually so you can see how they've engaged. Heading to the next question. I'm releasing a new song and I just tried picking my target audience and I received this message. There aren't enough listeners in your selection to meet campaign requirements. Try modifying your start date or target country. It seems it will only let me use a default campaign. So if you're doing this obviously in Spotify for Artists, it's coming up basically saying that your release is not eligible. To book a campaign, you need to have had at least 5,000 streams within that market and 1,000 followers. So I don't know if that answers your question. If this artist doesn't meet those requirements, it seems like that may be the case, that there aren't enough listeners in that particular market to be eligible to be able to deliver our minimum spend requirement of $100. So next question, what is the listener threshold before the Marquee breaks into different segments? Oh, sorry, I've got someone entering my room. Josephine, sorry, can I just hand over to you for 1 second?
Yeah, I'll hand it. Yeah, of course. What is the listener threshold before the Marquee breaks into different segments like region? I actually don't know what this question means. I think maybe you're talking about like what regions what markets we're in. And today, Marquee and Esprit is available to folks with US billing country, UK billing country, Canada, and Australia. But let us know if we didn't answer your initial question. We're happy to take it offline and to respond to async. Cool. Do you have to be located in the US to use Marquee? I know it's previously required a US billing address and credit card. So right now, you have to have either a US billing address and credit card or a billing address and credit card in Australia, Canada, or the UK. So those are the 4 markets where it's available today. And we're continuing to expand to other markets as well. Great. What are the retention rates of activating and reactivating audiences? In our experience, we see the campaign bump and then drop a month or 2 later, unless we're constantly releasing singles, which don't have the same marketing budget as albums allocated to Marquee. So yeah, we don't have specific retention rates, but I will say that with kind of the strategies we're outlining, at least with previously active, which is a relatively new segment as of a few months ago. Targeting your previously active audience and bringing them back into your active audience is a good way to retain them and to bring them back. So that's what we're seeing so far as well. But of course, there's other ways to just continue engaging your audience even beyond the release cycle, whether it's uploading a canvas. Or updating your artist profile or using promo cards off Spotify. We see a lot of different ways to kind of keep engaging your audience, even outside of the release moment. Why do I only have Canada and US as options to run Marquee? So I assume this is in Spotify for Artists. That's probably because when we took a look at your at the number of listeners you could reach in these other markets like the UK, etc. Then we don't see enough listeners for you to reach to spend your budget. So there's just not enough inventory there. So I think that's probably if you mean it from a targeting perspective, and then from like a billing country perspective, it's available to artists and their teams with a US billing country, Canadian billing country, Australia, or UK. Yeah, what's the best way to determine the amount you should spend on real artists and what their goals are and what we think we are likely to deliver on that as well. But again, it really depends on your goals and how you're thinking about investing in this particular campaign or release.
Josephine, I'm back now. I can take over.
Welcome back.
For anyone in the room, I'm in the office, and I don't know if anyone else has the horrible things of trying to get chucked out of a room, even though I had it booked. So sorry about that, everyone. So the next question was also about determining what budget to spend. So yes, you'll see the forecast available. So you can obviously book either the lower side of the threshold or the higher side of the threshold. And obviously, if you run a campaign and the results are great, then you can obviously book another campaign on top of that. The next question, says, when will Marquee be available for baby artists? So Marquee is available to everyone, but as I think we've said, we look for at least 5,000 streams in that market and around 1K followers, and looking at the active audience as well to be eligible. Next question is, does joined your active audience for the first time mean they come back to stream or add the track after they played it from a Marquee ad? So I don't know what you mean by joined your active audience for the first time, but an active listener is someone who has purposely gone on to stream that artist. They've searched for the artist in Spotify search bar or listened via their This Is playlist. rather than maybe algorithmic or editorial playlists. So that's how we define an active audience. Josephine, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that.
I think they were talking about the new active listener metric.
Oh, sorry.
Because that means joined your active audience for the first time. So that means they've never actively streamed your music. So, and because they saw a marquee, the marquee actually brought them into an active streaming session because it takes listeners to the release page. So I think that's what you were talking about here.
Next question is, where do we view the audience engagement in S4A? You should have an audience tab available on Spotify for artists, but if you're not seeing that, I don't know if there's somewhere we can put a link for support, so we can look into that for you to be able to see the audience tab.
It is only on desktop, so you won't see it on mobile. Is probably a good place to start too. But yeah, you just click to the audience. You click on the audience tab in the left pane, and you should be able to see segments as well as audience engagement subtabs.
So next question is, in which format do these tracks show up in people's playlists? Do they just get added while they're listening to other music and your music pops up in there, or is there an advertisement they see? I'm not too sure what this question is referring to. In which format?
I think they're just talking about how Marquee appears, maybe, because I think at the beginning some people couldn't hear the audio.
Oh, maybe. So a marquee is a full screen recommendation. It's only served to people who are listeners or already fans of that particular artist. So it comes up as a notification on mobile only. And then when a user clicks, they're driven straight through to the release that you're promoting, and they can either save or add that release to one of their playlists or stream straight away. So next question, do you plan on running a marquee program for discovery, fans that are not fans yet, but like the same style, type of music, helping create new fans that are not aware of your music yet? So as it stands at the moment, the only way to reach new listeners would be if there's maybe more than one main artist tagged on the release. And that means the marquee will automatically target the fans of up to 3 different main artists on the release. That's what's currently on offer. Again, Josephine, I don't know if there's anything else to add to that.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question, and we're always looking for feedback in these sessions too that we can take back to our product team. So we'll definitely pass that along.
So next question would be useful to have some perspective on campaign budgets. If there's a minimum spend, are there examples of levels of effectiveness at levels of spend? So I think we mentioned earlier, the minimum spend via the self-serve platform is $100 or in your local currency, and then $250 via managed service. And yes, we have plenty of case studies that we can share with you, which look at all different levels of investment. Okay, so next question. Are there performance benchmarks that we can use to gauge over under indexing campaigns? Yes, we have benchmarks. We have some averages. Again, we can probably put this in the drop down now, or feel free to reach out to me and I will share those average benchmarks with you. We can break them down across markets and soon to follow across genres as well. Next question is, what is the minimum audience requirement to be eligible for Marquee? We look for around 5,000 streams in one market and 1,000 followers. And these have to be active listeners, people who have actively streamed the artist. Next question, can Marquee increase skip rates if the audience doesn't respond to the single and her algorithmic pushes from DW and RR? Which I guess is Discover Weekly and Release Radar. Josephine, have you got an answer for this one?
No, I mean, they're totally distinct. Like Marquee, the goal of Marquee is really to drive you into active streaming sessions, whereas Discover Weekly and Release Radar are programmed streaming. So you can think of them as 2 different but complementary ecosystems. So if somebody is not engaging with your Marquee, that doesn't feed into some other aspect of programming.
Great. Next question, how are super listeners determined? Is it a percentage of how much time they spend on Spotify versus the percentage they're listening to you? Is it a stream threshold? Just curious what the data determines the different tiers of listeners. So a super listener is a listener who has streamed that particular artist the most over the last 28 days. So just to give a bit of context there, so a light listener is someone who streamed maybe once or twice in the last 28 days. A moderate listener is someone who's streamed many times in the last 28 days. And a super listener is someone who streamed the most over the last 28 days. So next question. I'm not seeing the same dialogue boxes in the Marquee campaign report, like more clear summary of what the campaign did, specifically the bit about how many listeners were converted. My campaign stops reporting on the 18th. Is that when this information comes up? So if you booked a campaign in Spotify for artists, then you should have all of the reporting that was shown today within the campaigns tab. Again, Josephine, I don't know if there's anything else we can look into here.
So the user interface, the design we presented today is a sneak peek into some changes and like improvements we're launching very soon, like truly in the coming week. So if you have a campaign that's starting in the next couple of days, then you're going to start to see this new design and the new audience development section. So that is actually new and kind of got a sneak peek of it today. So if you don't see that specific design today, that's totally normal. It's coming soon.
Next question is, when is the best time to launch Marquee? Day of release or a few days after? So again, this really does depend on the campaign goals, but we actually exclude anyone who has already streamed from the release. So your money will not be spent on someone who's already streamed from the new release that you're promoting. So if you do want to launch on the day of the release for that, large splash, for that, roll-on effect of increasing streams straight away, then please do. But a lot of other labels also tend to launch a campaign maybe 3 or 4 days after the release to let those organic streams naturally happen for the people who are already aware of the new release coming out. Next question. What are the requirements to access the Marquee campaigns? This person has a new artist that did very well with Spotify traffic ads, triggering Release Radar and Discover Weekly. We want to maximize momentum and do a Marquee, but the option is not available. She generated 20k streams in 2 months from her profile and listener library. So as we said a few times now, ideally we look at a listener who has around 5,000 streams within the last 28 days in any one given market, and around 1k followers to be eligible for a Marquee. But also, as I think we've mentioned a few times as well, we're looking at the active audience. So it also looks at how they actively stream. Are they purposely searching for the artist rather than listening through editorial playlists or algorithmic playlists like Discover Weekly, etc. Next question, is there going to be a way to target cold audience with similar interests to our music style in the future? So you can do this with other Spotify ads like audio or video, but for the time being, the targeting that we have available for Marquee, we've run through today. Josephine, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that one.
I think the only other thing I'd add is that when you do have a single, when you're promoting a single and you have multiple main artists on the release, that's potentially another way to kind of get at some of those like colder audiences too.
Is it best to run different countries' Marquee simultaneously or one by one, e.g. every 7 days, a new country? I think, again, it really depends on the release strategy and if the release is coming out on the same day. But obviously, they're being served in different markets. So I think it's really a call on which markets are more important to the release or to the artist on when and how you start them. Yeah, again, I think we've shared a few strategies already, but I don't know, Josephine, if there's anything else again you want to add to that one.
No, I think we kind of covered it. I think it really depends on your goals and what you're optimizing for. And we've seen people start their campaign on release day as well as a few days after, and just have different kind of things that they're focused on. And so really using campaign timing to get at that.
So next question is is the data collected throughout the duration of the Marquee campaign applied beyond the campaign to help target similar fans in algorithmic playlists? So a Marquee campaign runs for up to 10 days or as quickly as the click goal is achieved. And we actually report there's an attribution window of up to 14 days post the campaign end date. So that's the data we report on. Josephine, I don't know if there's anything you want to add on applied beyond the campaign.
No, I don't think so. No, I don't think there's really like a linkage here.
Cool, I'll move on to the next question. Any best practices if you haven't released a single, as in which audience best to target on release day? If you haven't run a campaign before, then we have got the option to target the total audience. So you could always target the total audience for the first time you're using Marquee, see how the results look for you, and then next time try any of the segments. It depends on your release strategy. If you're looking to increase streams straight away and get as many people listening and streaming your release, then the total audience would make sense. But if you're also looking to, move fans along the funnel from light listeners to moderate to super, then that's when you would choose the segments. Or again, if you're looking to re-engage with an audience who hasn't maybe streamed in a while, then that's when you would select the previously active audience.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to what you want to focus on, because if you target previously active, then you're reaching people who haven't actively streamed in the last 28 days. So it's a good way to kind of wake them up with your album. But then maybe you actually want to like drive much bigger engagement, maximize engagement on release day, in which case engaging people that have been streaming you in the last 28 days could be also a great strategy too.
Next question is, will Marquee ever become available for previous releases and not just restricted to future or new releases? So Marquee is a format built for new music and promoting new music. In the very near future, we will have other native formats available. We'll be rolling out Showcase in the US via Spotify for Artists very soon, and hopefully in all other markets following on from that very, very soon.
Yeah, just for more context, we actually pre-announced Showcase at Spotify Stream On earlier this year, and we see that as a really great way to drive engagement beyond just the release moment and really engaging with fans and potential fans anytime. So more to come there, but it's a really great question because we're hoping to solve for that with another new product we're building.
Yes, very, very excited. So next question, if active audience targeting isn't available, how many listeners are required to unlock this feature in Marquee? So I think this question is again related to making, if the Marquee is eligible for a particular artist. So we're still looking at that 5K streams and 1K followers in that particular market to be eligible for a Marquee. Next question is, are there strategies for using Marquee to promote post-release touring? So you can use Marquee for new releases and up to 21 days post-release. As we just said, Marquee is available to promote new releases only. I don't know if I've read that question correctly or not, Josie. I don't know if there's another response you'd add to that.
I think also just to piggyback off my previous comment, Showcase is going to be another new product we're launching soon that enables you to promote your music basically anytime. So if you have a tour coming up and you want to promote your music, that would be a great way to use it to re-engage fans. Granted, it's not necessarily promoting your tour, but just re-engaging them into your ecosystem, bringing them back into your world where they could see or be reminded of the fact that you've got a tour coming. So another product coming soon, but we really think that'll be a good way to kind of get at what this question is asking.
The next question is, are there plans to expand the countries we can target? Also, it would be great if we could help guide the platform by targeting the audiences of certain artists. Any plans on expanding targeting options. So a few questions within that. Yes, we will be expanding to other countries from a targeting perspective. We obviously would like Marquee to be available worldwide. Bear with us as we get there. But I mean, you can select multiple different countries now, regardless of where you are buying from. And if you're looking for a guide on which markets to actually target, you can see that within Spotify for Artists to see where you have the most listeners by all the different locations. Again, Josephine, anything to add to this one?
No, I mean, I think it'd be great to hear like more thoughts from you, maybe in the chat or something, of like what are the countries you're really excited about that we don't currently target. Always looking to expand targeting options and country targeting. So more ideas you have, the better, and we can pass those along.
Yes, that'd be great. Next question. When you have a feature, can you run two marquees, one from your profile and one from theirs? That would hit both your listeners, correct? So just to be clear, we actually can't target featured artists, the fans of featured artists. We can only target the fans of the main artists listed on the release. And the marquee will automatically target the fans of all the main artists listed on the release. That is actually one of the only ways to actually engage with new listeners, is by kind of piggybacking on the other artists listed on the release. Next question, a little off topic, but could you please tell me if there is a way to engage your Spotify followers when releasing? On my last release, only 0.2% of my followers streamed the release. That is a little off topic for me. Josephine?
I mean, I would say that Marquee, as it is today, does reach your followers. So if you're using Marquee to promote your release, it should reach your followers as well. Whether all those followers are reached and whether they're listening is kind of a different question, but this would be a good way to try to engage your Spotify followers when releasing. And then the only other thing is that I think your followers obviously get your music in their different programmed context as well. So the release radars and their what's new feed.
So next question, does Marquee show how many clicks to the artist song, or does it only count if the person actually listens to the song? So there's lots of different metrics that we report on. So we can report on the click-through rate, the listener conversion rate. So that's how many people were actually served the Marquee, regardless if they clicked on it or not, and then they went on to stream. We report on the streams per listener, the intent rate. So that's looking at if they've saved a track from the release or they've added a track to the playlist. So to answer your question, we'll show how many clicks and how many streams and how many listeners. We report on quite a lot. So next one is, I'm United States-based Nigerian-born Afrobeats artist. I saw a fan engagement tab on your demo. I am part of Marquee Beta and Discovery Mode Beta. I just released a new song today, African Woman Sped Up. Hence the question, I wanted to see how the fan engagements beta program works. Sorry, this is the follow-up from a previous question. So the question is, I wanted to see how the fan engagements beta program works.
I think actually on reflection, I think they're talking about the audience engagement beta in the audience tab of Spotify for Artists. So it's actually an analytics page. Which honestly, everyone should have access to that. So try going into Spotify for Artists on desktop, it's not on mobile, go to the audience section on the left-hand pane, and then you should be able to see audience engagement beta if that's what you're asking about. It's just basically a new analytics page where we have some more data on kind of how your audience is engaging with your music.
Cool. So I think we've got about 5 more minutes, so we'll keep running through until we get a little bit closer to the end. So the next question is, would marketing to superfans make a lot of sense considering they're theoretically more likely to find the release on their own? What would you say is the main benefit there? So yes, you are theoretically, you are right. You would hope that superfans are going to stream the release straight away. So it might be best if you could run, if you're going to run maybe multiple campaigns, that you could target the other segments first. And throughout the kind of the release cycle within that first 21 days, you can start to look in Spotify for Artists to see how superfans are engaging. And if they're not necessarily engaging in the ways that you hope, then maybe that would be a great opportunity then to start utilizing Marquee to target superfans. And like I said earlier, even if you do decide to target the superfans straight away, we will only serve it to the superfans that have not yet engaged with the release. So it might be that you target the superfans towards the end of that 21-day kind of release cycle. So in that last week, where you've already been looking to see how your fans are engaging, that's when you may choose the superfans.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think if you get to the last day of when you can promote a marquee and you still see the audience forecast, you can still reach a lot of super listeners, then that makes a ton of sense as a audience target, because it's really important that those people stay engaged, since super listeners are the ones that drive the most streaming 6 months later. They drive the most merch, a lot of other engagement. Obviously, they're your super listeners. So I totally echo Stephanie about trying to kind of like wait and see, and then they're a great segment to target towards the end of your release cycle.
So the next question is, any thoughts on Spotify Ad Studio for new releases? So yes, you can use Ad Studio. You can book audio or video campaigns within Ad Studio to promote your new releases to similar artist audiences. Marquee and any of the other formats we've talked about today are not available within Ad Studio. So
yeah.
Sorry,
I was just going to say, the only other thing I'd say is that Ad Studio ads target Spotify free listeners, and our ads target free and premium. So we've looked at some of the data, and there's quite low overlap between reaching people with Ad Studio ads versus reaching people with Marquee. So if you want to also go bigger on free and reach different types of demographics, et cetera, and then use Spotify for Artists to really focus on like more of the premium listeners, that's also a potential strategy too.
So next question is, I'm releasing a new single next Friday. I have 2 marquees set up, one for release day to like moderate listeners and one set up 20 days after to all active. Any other tools you recommend I set up? Well, I feel like you're nailing it already. Great strategy there. So, I mean, it looks like you've probably got set up what both Josephine and I would probably recommend. As we've stated, we're really excited to have some new formats, i.e. Showcase, launching very, very soon. So in the future, hopefully you'll be able to use both formats together. Again, Josephine, don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that one.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. I wouldn't add anything.
So next one is, can you target fans of similar artists for an awareness campaign and marquee? No is the answer, unless there is more than one main artist listed on the release. The whole point of marquee is to deliver it to people who we know are going to enjoy that release and hopefully go on to stream more tracks from that artist. Rather than promoting the release to people if we're unsure if they're going to be a fan or not. So next question, would you recommend running a marquee for every release regardless, or only on releases that we feel the strongest about? I guess it depends on your budget and any of the goals for your release and what you're trying to achieve. The whole point of marquee is recommending the new release to an artist fan, onto the artist fans. So if you feel strongly that you'd like it to promote it and get obviously more streams, then yes, of course you should be running a marquee campaign. Josephine, again, not sure you want to add anything to that apart from yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really depends. We've seen both. Like, we have seen some artists that they say they have like a waterfall or like a cadence of pre-release singles, and they're releasing 6 singles ahead of the album. Sometimes they do run a marquee on every single and then the album. But then we've had other folks that just really focus their budget on the album moment, really focusing on that, and then use more organic engagement for those pre-release singles. So both are good strategies. It really depends on which how you want to stagger things.
And I guess as well, you can utilize our different targeting capabilities as well. So it could be that for some of the, you know, single releases that you're targeting the total audience, but off the back of some of maybe the data that we provided, then afterwards you may want to target some of the segments or try and reactivate an audience for the album. So I guess it's just you can use the segments in different ways. I believe we're at time, so we're not going to be able to answer any more of the questions, but I believe we have them on record, so we can do our best, if we haven't already, to answer any of the ones outstanding. So I guess I would just like to thank everyone for their time, and thank you for joining. Feel free to reach out to any of us today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. We'll answer the rest of y'all's questions async. So really appreciate the engagement, and I hope hopefully we're helpful, and it was kind of fun to see the demo. So any feedback you have, we'll probably also send a post-release feedback form too. So I love that. And yeah, we'll send out the recording. Cool. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Hope everyone
Bye.
has good days. Bye.